What's up? What's up?
What's up? What's up? What's up?
Oh man, you're just doing the usual thing, man. Talking on Discourse, and hopefully we got some good questions today because we have a pretty broad, generalized topic that typically most people have pretty strong opinions on. I'll say. So hopefully we can shed some insight to the community here on some of the most controversial aspects, or even just commonly asked questions of resistance training.
Yeah. I think obviously we've referenced training and exercise, I think very generally for a long time, like this is episode 17, I think it is. Is that right?
Are we on 17? We should put the episode number. I feel like.
It's on
Or
yeah, maybe I'll start putting that in the title. It's in the like the thumbnail that I put up is what it ends up showing. Yeah, episode 17.
Gotcha.
So we've definitely made a ton of reference to training, cardio, weightlifting, resistance training. There's a whole bunch of different names for like more specific versions of exercise. And today I think one that's really, really prevalent amongst the crypto community, our community, is weightlifting or resistance training. So resistance training definitely being the more broad category. And yeah, just really want to talk about it in general. I think just like address it from a like first principles kind of standpoint, like what it is, like why it's useful, what it does, what it can be useful for, like those kinds of really, really just fundamental questions. And then maybe get into a little more detail about programming. It seems like there's a million programs you can buy online nowadays, and people end up just like buying program after program after program, and maybe that's helping them, maybe it's not. Talk a little bit about programming, and then I don't know, answer some questions. Shoot the shit. Yeah, do the usual thing.
Well, where do you want to start with? We can do programming first. We can do rep ranges. We can do the kind of resistance training. Because I will say with the demographic I work with, I've seen so much insane data, like actually data sets from females. This is mostly females 40 to 65, like I've typically said in this channel, where even just walking and getting their steps in, I've seen so many case studies where they're losing on their measurements, improving their strength and stamina, but the weigh-ins are at a slower pace that would like actually make sense, right? So they'd be down in 2 weeks, maybe half a pound on their average, which isn't a whole lot, but they'd be down 1.5 inches on their waist, which doesn't correlate, right? From like a pacing perspective. So it's been crazy for me to see just how effective some of that stuff can be. Of course, depending on the person and stuff, but obviously you can do a lot more than just walking and getting steps in to be active and breaking down muscle tissue. But it was just curious, even surprising for me. I'll word it like that, coming from a bodybuilding background to see how effective that actually could be. Because I think people have the wrong idea. They think, oh, you're not breaking down muscle tissue unless you're doing like these heavy sets and lifts in the gym or at home. And I just find that typically to not be the case. Of course, trying to be a professional bodybuilder, yeah, lifting could be obviously the best tool there. But yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But it's just been really interesting to see that correlation there.
Yeah, there's so much like data and nuance and stuff that does fly under the radar as being like applicable and true to a massive amount of the population that doesn't necessarily get recommended or get the spotlight because it's not flashy, it's not sexy, it's not this transformation, or it's not this picture on a magazine cover, right? It's way more it's this approach that I think you and I take across all of these topics. It's a much more moderate, sustainable, adherable, long-term view of a thing or a
but that's idea. Not sexy, bro.
No, right? Like, hey,
how do we send it?
How am I going to get people to scroll down and buy my six-pack shortcuts shit? How am I going to get people to buy my fat burners 6 ab giver pill? Like, so that is what we're lacking, and unfortunately, that grabs way too many eyes in this industry.
It really does. It does, man. Dude, the amount of people that I will have come on, and we're already forgetting it as a culture that like we just got locked down, depending on what country you're in, for anywhere from 6 months to maybe 2 years now. And it's like guys or girls both. And I see we have a comment asking about some stuff with females. But we're forgetting that we just got locked down for a long time, where our activity levels and our ability to work out, like maybe you had stuff at home to work out, that's great, then you're set. But a lot of people didn't. And a lot of people relied on the gym or some sort of, being outside or activity levels where you could be doing resistance training as long as those places were open. So the point is I'm already having people talk to me, be like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm like, whoa. Listen, chill, talk to your wife, talk to your husband. You have kids. Let's think about what makes sense. Because if you are going to get into something like resistance training, make sure it makes sense from a time commitment standpoint. Because what makes it unfun right out the gate is if you feel too committed to it and there's too much time invested going into it and you can't stick to it. So even if you do enjoy doing it, you're just going to feel terrible about not being able to do it enough as pertains to whatever ridiculous standard people that I see are putting on themselves. They think they have to go 6 to 7 times a week. So I think a good thing to talk about, unless we have some initial questions, is how much do you really have to break down muscle tissue a week to create incredibly good results from a muscle breakdown situation, right? For normal people, even for like bodybuilders per se. And I think you could give some great insight on that one particularly.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say, and I'll talk more about this maybe a little bit later on, but like this was one of my big research questions that I was trying to answer when I did my thesis. I think this was probably episode 1 or 2 that I probably brought up slides from it, and I was tempted to bring up this. Maybe I will bring up the slides later. Who knows? Go old school on you again.
Exercise loves its slides.
Yeah. Anyways, my thesis project, one of the big research questions was looking for a more adherable exercise regimen or exercise prescription. Because right now, when you look at what all the doctors go off of, ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine, they've got these recommendations just memorized, right? The MDs. So they are like, hey, this is what is good. This is what we are saying you should be doing. But that isn't necessarily what the only thing that works. These are things and programs that we know work, and we have evidence to show that they work. But it might not be adherable for somebody getting off of zero. So one of the big reasons for this research question was my dad had a heart attack. He made it through. It was pretty minor. It went all good. But when he was coming out of recovery, there was great cardiac rehab in the hospital. But as he was leaving, he's just left with these blanket recommendations of, hey, you should be doing 3 to 5 days per week of cardio and then 2 to 3 days per week of resistance training. Well, guess what? If you go to the maximum side of that scale, that adds up to 8 days per week. 5 and 3. What? Number 2, what if my father had not worked out in I don't know how long? He doesn't even know how long, right? 20 years. He's got a pretty labor intensive job, so he got a lot of activity in that way, and then maybe through some sports and other things. But dedicating time to working out was not a thing he did, and I think that represents a huge part, if not the majority, of the population not dedicating, right? So all of a sudden,
absolutely majority, man.
He's thrown this program where it's hey, you should be doing 3 to 5 days per week of this, or aiming for 3 to 5 days per week, and then aiming for 2 to 3. And there's this thing that's built in to health and fitness is there's this pinnacle of perfection that's always sought after, right? It's I should be eating perfectly and lifting perfectly and running perfectly and meeting 8 days, meeting all of these recommendations. So to try to summarize here, because I want to loop back to try to get just a basic view of resistance training, is we investigated a whole bunch of different programs. I'll bring up some of the data on it later, I guess. My shortest or my least intensive group, or my least frequent group, came in and trained once per week. So I specifically looked at resistance training, and then we compared that against a traditional group where they came in 3 days per week, that there are 3 sets of 10 reps. That's what everybody kind of thinks about oftentimes when they think about starting a resistance training program or a lifting program. And it was very, very similar, extremely similar. It's why are we setting people up for failure, right? The adherence rate is shit. When people are getting off of zero, when they're new to exercise. So I looked at beginners, and so before this comment even came in, Monica, my study looked at females in particular. So we'll bring some of that up a little bit later, and I think directly address some of your questions, hopefully. In general, all these principles that we're going to talk about apply to both men and women. And then maybe we'll try to get you to follow up here. Your question, how can I maximize? Could you just be a little bit more specific? Maximize muscle growth. I think that's one of the things we'll cover here right away as well. When you're getting to resistance training, a really important thing is like to define is what your goal is. So maybe try and follow up here, and then I'll get back to you with a better answer. Okay, I wanted to loop back and just like pose a question to you, Ryan. And when I just give you the term resistance training, what is resistance training, and what does that mean to you?
Anytime the human body is moving some sort of what's the right word to describe this? Any sort of breakdown of muscle tissue, I would say effectively, right? So there is like layers to this, because how effectively can we break down the muscle fiber? But I would say any breakdown of muscle fiber, the only way to really not do resistance training is if you're just sitting down on the couch all day, literally not moving, right? It'd be very tough to do that because most people are moving around to some degree, which is why I think most people are underestimating truly what they need to do, whether it be volume or what it is that they're actually doing in order to create the desired result they want. It's just a huge, massive misunderstanding. So people really mess up the game theory and the mechanics of working out because they assign way too much volume, or way too much of like an outlier in terms of like they can't stick to it, right? They assign too much that would be way too far out of the range of what they would normally care to do for a long period of time. So they go way too crazy, overburn themselves with it, and don't stick to it. And then honestly, like if you could just resistance train at maybe 2x a week for 3 years in a row, what could you achieve versus 5x a week for 2 months and get burned out? Well, obviously the person 2x a week, assuming dietary is the same, is going to vastly outperform. So to directly answer the question, I would say any real form of muscle breakdown. And that could be from something as simple as walking up a flight of stairs, from your calves to your quads and your glutes. Like people forget that we use muscle just to exist as human beings, and we need it. It helps with our basal metabolic rate. There's a lot of factors. So people, I think, really unfairly categorize resistance training as go to the gym, lift weights, bodybuilding, blah, 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 which really to me kills the whole vibe. Kills the whole vibe, man. If you don't know how to look great without weight training, you don't know what you're doing. That's a side comment, right? That's a side come at me, bro, kind of comment. But that's the facts. If you don't know,
we've talked about that a lot.
100%. So that's what I would say is just simply breaking down muscle tissue, creating micro tears in the muscle fiber, whatever way that may be.
Very nice. I think it's very simple, and it encompasses, I think, more than most people would with their definitions. A lot of people just immediately think like lifting weights, like you're in the gym, benching or shrugging or squat, or doing something in a gym with weights, like a barbell or dumbbells or machines or something like that. I don't have the definition pulled up, but I'm just going to say any time that a targeted muscle is under load is now resistance training. It's anytime the muscle is working or contracting against resistance. So one of the things that people immediately overlook, just like in your explanation you mentioned, is something like walking. Like, is walking resistance training? Technically, yes, it is. Right? Is running resistance training? Sure. Technically, yes, it is. Right? The thing that you want to define here is like what type of adaptation or what type of outcome do you want to see happen? So when you're running, right, so there's a whole bunch of different ways that we can get this load into the muscle. A very simple way is to use an actual external load, like a barbell, or external weight, external resistance, dumbbell, barbell, kettlebell, whatever you want, and then do some sort of exercise through a range of motion. Bingo, bango, bongo. You have external load on that targeted muscle, but it doesn't have to be external load. Gravity applies to this external load already, but your body weight can count as load to the muscle in a ton of circumstances. So it's just, resistance training broadly is just referring to, the muscle contracting against added resistance. So now muscles adapt to training in many ways, right? If you walk, if you run, there's adaptation that occurs in your muscle, big time. When you lift weights, when you resistance train more specifically for something like strength, for trying to lift more weight, they will adapt in a much different way. So that's why we get this really, really like dichotomous breakdown of resistance training that kind of goes towards, like exercise that goes towards cardiovascular training, and then resistance training is kind of where it branches off. So I think in this episode, we'll try to focus mainly on the resistance training. So we're trying to actually add load through some sort of range of motion. I think that's like a pretty decent, very broad term to sum it up. And again, there's like gravity, we've got elasticity. So your what the hell are they called? Resistance bands. They've become extremely popular. You have
got the Bowflex,
friction, fluid. Like there's so many different this is like going back to physics now, right? But there's so many different forces that can actually create resistance for the muscle. Yeah, that's going to be, I think, our base, like fundamental definition or working definition moving forward.
Which, and then I feel like people understand that, but don't understand how it works out practically in a practical matter, like through like actual application, you know?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We had a follow up here. Let's see if we can answer this one a little bit better. So definition and staying lean. I'm feeling like it is getting harder as I get older. I'm up 12 pounds and I feel like I eat well and work out. WTF. Yeah, getting old usually it does unfortunately have a whole bunch of drawbacks physically or physiologically and metabolically. The biggest thing, depending on what age you are, you'll start to see a drop off in BMR, so basal metabolic rate. That's where the majority of your caloric expenditure comes from. So that's just if you're sitting doing nothing, the amount of calories you spend basically to stay alive kind of naturally decreases with age. So it's something that you have to be extremely not mindful about, but like targeted about in your approach if you want to maintain the exact same lifestyle from your previous years. Definition and staying lean. This is a point that we've kind of pushed multiple times, is that the largest impact is going to be your intake here. So your nutrition, what you're eating day in and day out, as opposed to what you're doing in terms of training. Training definitely has large effects. Don't get me wrong about that. But the larger impact when it comes to what you're holding in terms of body fat, so body fat's going to be the largest factor when it comes to definition and staying lean. Your intake and your outtake, or your input and your output, when it comes to energy balance, is what has the largest effect. If you're trying, so a lot of people get into a cycle where their lifting or their exercise becomes the main goal becomes trying to burn calories, which I don't think should be the main goal. I think the main goal should be to try to elicit a beneficial response that will lead to adaptation for the next time. So if that's cardio, you'll see slightly better oxygen uptake eventually, which will lead to you being able to run that same mile a little bit quicker or with a little less intensity. When it comes to lifting weights, your muscle will make itself a little bit bigger, and then next time it'll actually be able to lift a little bit more weight. So those are like some of the like actual beneficial adaptations that occur. Resistance training specifically, and especially for women, its number one result that I think is most impactful for longevity and lifespan is the bone mineral density effects that it gives off. You will increase your bone mineral density if you resistance train. As you age, cool. bone mineral density is one of the greatest predictors of injury. One of the greatest predictors.
Does that hold true for guys too? Just as strong of a correlation?
Just as strong. It's just women are a little bit more at risk for this because after they go through menopause, they lose bone mineral density at a rate much, much faster due to hormonal reasons. So it sucks, but if you are aware of this, you can build it up to a point that you will have a much longer runway once you start to encounter some of those conditions. So I think the most beneficial thing to everybody that comes from resistance training is bone mineral density. Following that is overall muscle strength and endurance and like vis-a-vis muscle health. This will help you move throughout your life better. You'll have a higher quality of life if you can get from point A to point B, up a flight of stairs, play with your kids, whatever your task might be, you will be using muscle contraction to get that done. So now if you want to get more specific, when you get down the line to like trying to design a program, you can try to target that. But in general, moving and getting into any sort of resistance training will elicit beneficial responses. So this is, let's try and sum up an answer here. I just ended up ranting, Monica. Yeah, so I think the hard pill to swallow here is if you are up 12 pounds from what you're used to, it is and you feel like you're working out in similar ways and you're eating well, it most likely means your intake is just significantly more than your output, right? So the calories that you're burning per day, and that's not necessarily just a function of the lifting, especially if it stayed the same, right? The BMR can be a much larger impact, such as decreasing basal metabolic rate. So that's just something that we kind of have to fight and target with aging and with lifespan. Naturally, your daily intake and your daily kcals will be going down, even if other things are staying the same. A way to like go and try and figure this out with a little more data would be to get a DEXA scan. That will give you a whole bunch of information. It'll give you information on muscle, which is one of the most calorically hungry, or it burns some of the most calories, along with bone mineral density, which plays into that. So, but that's not really available to most people. So a very good proxy for that is if the number on the scale is going up or down and your calories are staying the same. That turned into a rant. I don't know if that actually helped. Maybe try and summarize for me, Ryan.
Monica, short answer is without data, we don't know what's going on. If you say, hey, I'm up 12 pounds, is that in a day? Is that in a month? Is that in 6 months? Is that from one day to the next? And is the data you're looking at, does it make sense? Because without that, it's like tracking a bank account. If you track it once every 3 years, how are you really going to discern what happened in between if you don't have the data in there? So as it pertains to this, I definitely recommend paying attention to your calorie intake, because yes, the hard pill also to swallow is you're not burning as many calories as you think working out, which is not a bad thing, but it shouldn't be the majority of how this deficit is created if you are indeed trying to lose weight. When someone I see from a structural and mechanics point of view goes into a weight loss phase and they're trying to make all that weight loss happen with just activity levels because they're already on a calorie count that's very low, it shows me that, from a metabolism standpoint, they're not in a spot that's conducive for healthy and sustainable weight loss because they're relying too heavily on activity levels, which are very transitory. They kind of blow with the wind. So if you're not able to lose weight without working out at all, you're probably not in a spot that's conducive to lose weight with working out. Think of it that way. So I would definitely pay attention to your calorie count, see where you're at, because if you're kind of making good decisions in some areas and saving on calories, it's kind of like budgeting. If you budget and spend less money on changing bread, so you save $1, but then you overspend on a t-shirt and overspend by $60, are you really saving money for the month? No, you're still overspending, right? So with food, it's the same way. Your body is the best thing ever at calorie counting. It will calorie count perfectly, no matter how accurate you are. So yes, hard pill to swallow is you need to get some data in there and start building your relationship with that, because that's going to give you the most clarity possible. Doesn't have to be weigh-ins, by the way. It could be your measurements. It could be the way your clothes fit. There are other methodologies there, right? I'm not just preaching weigh-ins, but I would start building your relationship with them, because it's kind of like tracking the bank account without any data. Like, it's pointless. Honestly, it really turns out to be pointless, which turns into a very frustrating experience for you. You don't know what's going on. You feel like you have no real options to move forward. And then eventually people say, F this, I'm out. and they quit or stop caring altogether, which is usually where the real regression happens, you know? So to summarize that, yes, I would recommend rebuilding your relationship with the data, because that takes time. So have grace with yourself on that one, because it is a delicate thing. But just know it gets built up in a really positive way over the long term if you know what you're doing. But yeah, you should be okay. Just pay attention to those things that we talked about, and you'll be golden. You will be golden. But yeah, dude, people, I think the one comment I made, I want to go back to it because people understand this. Like they'll like say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm breaking down muscle tissue and walking around and stuff, but they don't know how to extrapolate that to a data perspective. Because I had literally 3 conversations today where I was chatting with clients and they're down 4 to 5 inches on their waist. Think about this. You're down almost half a foot on your waist. And these clients are only down maybe 8 to 9 pounds in the beginning part of their process. One of them is only down 7. And part of that is because now she's weighing in at like 4 a.m. because of her job as a nurse. So the point is mentally that they're thinking, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. I am disappointed. I should have gotten more from being so consistent for, 2.5, 3 months. And it's like, listen, that's actually the best product I or anybody else could give you. If your weigh-ins are staying up higher and your measurements are dropping aggressively still, and you're feeling great and feeling like you have more stamina, the ability to walk further and be stronger, etc., your body composition is improving tenfold compared to if we had just focused on getting the scale to go down, right? So people don't have this understanding of what actually happens when they're effective with weight training. And I feel like that causes more harm than good when people start their process out with weight training because they don't know how that's supposed to look from a numbers perspective. They know weight training good, but they don't know that, weight training means the weigh-ins go up. Weight training means muscle inflammation and water retention, and that the scale is going to go down slower, and that we should use the measurements instead of the weigh-ins and all this stuff, right? So they get really discouraged, really pissed off, and all their like huge effort into weight training is even more of a negative experience because they typically go way too hard, right? Like 5 times a week, 6 times a week, whatever. And they think more is better. I'm going to drop weight faster. And from what I've seen, it just doesn't always work out that way. Majority of the times I don't see it work out that way. And it's just crazy that people will like understand that if you say it to them. But when you actually extrapolate it into like the hardcore numbers and just like, hey, doing the thing every day and how they feel about it, it's a pretty jarring experience from what I've seen. It's a jarring experience and it's really frustrating for people. It really is. So that's just what I've noticed, man, honestly, across the board. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of doing some form of resistance training. It's not the only tool, right? We advocate all sorts of stuff here, but I love the gym myself. But I know it's not the only tool for the job. But the point is like you can be incredibly effective without it. But if you're going to do it, I definitely recommend taking an adequate amount of time to understand what's going to happen as a byproduct, because it's all good things, assuming you're training correctly and giving yourself enough time for rest and recovery. It's all good things. It's just, man, dude, people really can get in their heads. I'll tell you that much. They will self-sabotage so fast, dude. It's crazy.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to initiating or at the very start, like at the onset of resistance training or exercise in general, for a lot of people, they tend to overcomplicate it, right? They're like, they're again putting this pinnacle of perfection idealizing it like as paramount, and like if I don't do this specific thing, I will not receive these benefits from my program or whatever it is you're trying to do. So the exact same thing here applies to resistance training, especially, is that we have those kind of like blanket recommendations that we know work, but if you are getting off of 0 and you are initiating exercise, there's a principle of progressive overload that you can apply to all different types of training. And that is, if you are week over week, month over month, year over year, increasing the amount of, let's just use stress as the overall term, whether that be weights, whether that be cardio, whatever it is, if you are progressively increasing that load, the body will continue to change to try to meet that load or try to meet the adaptation that load requires. And that's it. So if you're getting off of 0, you can go once per week if you want. You can go once every 2 weeks. I don't. If you're getting off 0, like we're talking about trying to be better than 0. I don't want you to be shooting at 7 days in the gym a week, but that seems to be what a lot of people do. And then they're like, oh, I need to do my 4 sets of 12 reps and then they see all this jargon that might not make a lot of sense, especially if you're new to this world, at 80% 1 RM or at 9 RPE at whatever at 1 RIR, 1 rep in reserve, 2 reps in reserve. And I just think it gets overcomplicated and then diluted, and it becomes this massive thing and all like these huge targets that people are trying to hit. And maybe some of them will hit them, but the majority are not, right? The adherence sucks. Especially, when you're getting into it, it sucks. So it's just, I think it's an unpopular opinion. One of the things that I would still like to do is change like the actual like recommendations. I think, let's purvey and even put out like, hey, 2 to 3 days per week is what you should be aiming for. Side note, going once per week elicits the same amount of gains in terms of muscle adaptation if you're new.
Dude, I agree.
I do think 2 to 3 weeks is probably around the number that you should eventually be trying to incorporate some form of resistance training that works for you and your schedule and that you can adhere to over a long ass period of time. I'm talking 10, 20, 30 years, right? If you, like you're saying, if you've got a wife and kids and shit going on, you want to sign up to a 7-day per week program, day one here for and then if we're trying to incorporate overload, we just run out of options that much sooner. It's like, well, I've been in the gym 7 days per week doing 5 sets of 5 or 10 or 3 sets of 10. Well, shit, the next thing we do is add another set. Like what's the next thing we do to add extra volume or extra load, to progressively overload that stimulus or that stress? It's like, don't have a lot of options. So I really, really like the starting low and slow. If Monica is still around, I'm just going to bring this up just to try to make it hit home a little bit. And it is going to be slides, everybody, just so you know. Share screen. And bring it up here. Okay. So let's actually go back to my actual people. Day one. Okay, so I had 46 female subjects, all between the ages of 18 and 35. They were all recruited basically from a university campus. They were all new to weightlifting, or they had not, or resistance training, lifting weights, or they had not done it in, I think our washout period was two years. So if you hadn't trained in 2 years, you were allowed into the study, and then you had to be active less than 3 days per week. So we were trying to really look at people who don't currently train, who are probably trying, well, if they're enrolling in the study, like this was voluntary, if they're enrolling in the study, they're probably interested in starting some sort of workout regimen, right?
Yeah.
So we ended up putting them into 4 different groups. Now, where the shit did my groups go? Shit. Too many slides in this fucking thing. Here we go. Okay, so of 46 females, they got filtered into 4 different groups at random. They either came in to group 1. So this was kind of my group. This was the group that I really, really pushed forward. Groups 2 and 3, the professor and my mentor that I worked with, he is a blood flow restriction specialist or expert in the field. So we had a couple of groups dedicated to that. That is it's kind of a weird technique. So I'm not even going to really reference it here. Versus, right, so we can really look at the data of this once per week group versus the traditional. So traditional being what the American College of Sports Medicine recommends. So if your doctor is just kind of like rattling off prescriptions that they know, they'll rattle off some data from or some recommendations from ACSM. So they came in 3 times per week. They started at 50% of their 1RM, and they did 3 sets of 10. This is kind of like the age-old, like what resistance training is. Like people go in the gym and they do 3 sets of 10. Like I'm not sure where that came from, but that is what, like, that's still in our recommendations, man. Three sets of 10.
Well, bro, you got the FDA out here recommending 2,000 calories a day in our current environment, and have not changed the verbiage on it in like 20 plus years. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the traditional group, and then my group that I really pushed to get into the study was the once per week group, and they came in once per week, and they did one set of approximately 10 reps. I always shot for the 10th rep to be around their maximum. So we were trying to have them work at a 10 rep maximum. Every single week that they could exceed that maximum, their weight went up. All right. So they started at a significantly higher intensity, but I don't see anything wrong with that, as outside of the fact that the ACSM or the recommendations that we currently have say start a little bit lower. So these guys started a little bit lower, and then they followed a more specific rule that is suggested by the ACSM, that they need to be able to perform 2 extra reps for 2 consecutive sessions before the weight increases. So they're also increasing at a slightly slower pace. All right. So traditional, what's recommended? All right. These they came in and they did leg extension and they did leg curl. I'm just going to scroll down to the muscle adaptations that we measured. We measured a whole bunch of shit, but this is kind of the meat and potatoes most people care about. If I'm lifting, am I getting stronger? Some of the actual muscular adaptations that are happening. And this is looking at the 1 rep max for a leg extension and a leg curl. So here's your groups at start. Here's your groups at finish. Now, I can't really cover this up right now, but if you look at this, try to ignore the identifiers for each group. Which group do you think did the best here? Like a lot of people will immediately guess, oh, the group that came in and trained more. Nope, this group is the once per week group. Now, before I tout them too highly, they're obviously at baseline they were a little bit of a stronger group, so that could be the reason that we saw the significant difference, right? If we just saw the same rate of change here, we wouldn't have seen a statistically significant difference here, but we did. So even though we accounted for this difference, it was still a significant difference in terms of change pre to post. They trained with me for 6 weeks. I trained every single one of these ladies for the whole time. Same thing down here. So again, you're going to see a higher baseline strength level, 1 rep max. They all, like every single group. So it doesn't really matter. So even though this one's up top here, they're all kind of increasing at a fairly similar rate. Here, there was no significant difference between groups, but a significant difference from pre to post. So all groups, what this allows us to conclude is to say all groups significantly increased strength pre to post training. Same thing up here in this figure. All groups significantly increased pre to post training. Specifically, our 1x per week group increased more than our other groups. That is what that figure is telling us. Maximal voluntary contraction is, again, some sort of maximal effort contraction against a static force. It's usually like a specialized machine. So again, really, really good estimation of strength. Again, same rates of change. No significant differences between groups. Significant difference pre to post training. All of these groups returned extremely similar results. Extremely similar. Isokinetic, so now isokinetic, you're moving through a leg extension, seeing how much peak torque you can create, kind of similar to an MVC, but now not quite at maximal. Again, same, man, everywhere. So these are different speeds now of leg extensions. Very similar.
Did your mentor get pissed when he saw that his method wasn't really?
One of the reasons he didn't really want my group to be included was because he wasn't sold that we were going to see enough change, right? Like one of the big traps you kind of end up falling into in academia, from what I can tell, is that you are looking for statistically significant things, right? P less
Mhm.
than 0.05 is like what everyone's searching for. That way they can go publish because they need to publish for tenure and yada, yada, yada. So that seemed to be his incentive behind it. So he was excited to see the 1X group, the 1 time per week group, do this. The blood flow restriction category, so that is a little more geared towards, he was more concerned with some of the arterial compliance outcomes. So we looked at elasticity and stiffness of your arteries at certain sites.
Okay.
Currently one of the main complaints against resistance training is that it makes your arteries stiffer. So atherosclerosis is a very, very common, usually later in life onset disease that just kind of accumulates. It's when your arteries become stiffer. It's directly correlated and sometimes even causal with some sort of cardiac event. It's when your arteries lose their elasticity. Being elastic, when your arteries are very elastic, it's very, very good. As they stiffen up, things can get very bad. And right now, one of the critiques of resistance training is that it increases stiffness. So if atherosclerosis causing stiffness is bad, people are like, look, resistance training is causing stiffness. It must be bad too. There's a lot more to that dialogue in that discussion, but that's what he was a little more interested in when it comes to blood flow restriction, because they lifted extremely light weights twice per week. So we had 2 groups. He had one group there come in once per week, BFR 1 time per week, and then BFR 2 times per week. And again, like if we're talking about like muscle adaptation, like getting stronger, right? Being able to lift more weight, and even endurance. Like one of these tests was an endurance test, this Thorstensen test, being able to produce more force for longer periods of time. Man, I don't really see the benefit in doing a specific one of these programs. The conclusion I come to is go work out once per week and make it hard. And that's it.
Right? People are gonna be like, wait, what? It has to be more complicated than this.
No, that's it, man. Especially if you are new, like go once a week.
Yeah, even more
like
so.
In a perfect world, like try to target most of the big muscle groups, but go work out once per week and make it hard. So that was the biggest difference that I saw between my once per week group and the traditional group. The traditional group, who's doing 3 sets of 10, starting at 50%, it wasn't really like difficult in terms of like intensity for them until, I don't know, probably like halfway through the like training, like 3 or 4 weeks into training. Like you could tell that it wasn't very difficult. And that might not be a bad way to, obviously it's not a bad way, right? So I think that's like one of the reasons that 1 time per week was able at a higher intensity to keep up with 3 times per week at a lower intensity. So like, yeah, my conclusion is kind of like do whatever the fuck you want and make it difficult, and try to include front and back muscles. And no more. Now do what you like. Do what you want. Those are my starting results.
Because then adherence comes up too. So
yeah, right. If you're doing what you want, and it's like if it's 1 day per week to start, or 1 day once every, it doesn't have to be on a weekly, but it could be once every 8 days, once every 9 days. I don't care. So this was just crazy to me, and I'm like, why are, like, we know adherence sucks. We know people don't lift. We know what works. We know 2 to 3 days per week, 3 sets per 10 works. Why? I get why it is the current recommendation. I just think there is more required in the recommendations. So one of our conclusions, where is it? The conclusion. It was just basically like, hey, go and do whatever you want.
Dude, you know why when we have this information, why the ability of misinformation to remain relevant still is because that's what is allowing companies to make money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it. The more people don't understand this, entire business models would fall apart. If this was actually thrown out there and reassessed and taught to people so they realize, hey, If you can't go to the gym one time a week and look the part, you don't know what you're doing. That's the easiest way to explain it. Because the rest of the equation, the physiology component, go back to our previous episodes, is from a nutritional intake and rest and recovery, period. And from a macro standpoint, macronutrient standpoint, depending on how effective you want to be with it. So although that may burst some people's bubbles and piss people off, what you got to understand that's a good thing. You don't have to live in this crazy environment where you're working out all the time and giving up all this time away. Especially like one of the commenters earlier said that they're a mother with kids. They don't have time typically to go to the freaking gym 2 times a week. They have maybe 20 minutes to do an at-home workout. Cool. That can work just fine. Anybody telling you otherwise also doesn't know what they're doing, or they're trying to scam you and make you buy some stuff or do a workout program that's likely you're not going to stick with and or get that much benefit from. Especially if the nutritional component's not there, the workouts are not pointless. This could even be its own episode in and of itself, is how pointless a workout can be if nutrition is garbage. But the point is without that intact, it's like you're giving up 80% to chase the 20 or even less than the 20. Why? Stop. Don't do this to yourself, man. It's not worth it. It's really, really not. So, to this guy's question here, if I live 6 days per week, how long until you're jacked? Honestly, it could be never. Honestly,
6 days.
Think of all the people here you go. Think of all the people you see in the gym who look the same all the time and are going to the gym all the time. They're working a job and not getting paid. Think about that. Think about the absurdity going on. That's like literally going to a job for probably a decade and not getting a paycheck and being just fine with it.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Like, I'd be pissed.
Yeah. You would have to be hopeful that there is some sort of underlying like improvement that's occurred. But yeah, it's extremely common.
Yeah, I mean, and yes, of course, like that's where the kind of question of like how much of it is still effective from a cardiovascular point of view, and then you may still put on muscle even if you're at body fat ranges that are not ideal, et cetera. Right? There's a lot of stuff we can go into. But in general, most people go to the gym, especially from a guy's perspective, right? I'm speaking for mainly guys here. Females are much better with this. They have way less ego and want to just look and feel a certain way. Guys, typically ego driven, that all the time, right? There's outliers, but they just want to like look jacked and be strong and stuff. And that typically means lowering body fat, increasing lean muscle mass, which means if you don't know what you're doing with dieting, you're never going to get there. That's why you see all these guys in the gym all the time and don't look the part. And not only don't look the part, but if they do, it's not for very long. It's for a very short period of time. If you know what you're doing, you look great all the time. And that's really from a nutritional standpoint. And we're not going to get into all the mechanics on that on today's episode, but just know it's a game theory and mechanics standpoint, as well as educational and mentorship standpoint. Because just like we said with the game theory and mechanics of working out, if you can't stick to it, it's pointless. There's your game theory. So first off, figure out what you can actually stick to based on your schedule, because you just found out that you can be incredibly effective working out 1 time a week. There you go. That's great news. It's the best news ever.
Yeah.
So from a game theory standpoint, start there. Adherence and sustainability are always going to be top priority. If you can't do it for more than 6 months, it don't matter, man. You're not going to maintain that muscle for very long. Even if you did go for 6 months in a row, 6 times a week, it's going to be gone.
Yeah. 6 days per week is a tough thing to do for a long ass time.
It is tragic.
I mentioned this earlier. Like, if you're starting low, you have so many tools to implement to make sure that you elicit the outcome that you want. Like, lots of times people who go, like, they go immediately 5 days per week or something like that, and they'll see their new gains for a long time, for like a year probably, but then they'll plateau. And if you're going 5 days per week, you doing like 5 by 5 or something like that, that's what I see most commonly. Like, I guess in like my age group, that's what we were doing. We were doing 5 by 5s. We were trying to get strong. We were trying to get jacked, right? Once you plateau there, like, there's some pretty like complex things and like programming principles that you need to start to invoke and apply to really make consistent and significant gains, like, from there on out. So starting low and slow just leaves so many options, like so many more paths forward for you to increase that progressive overload, to increase that stimulus day over day, or week over week, month over month, that I think it just makes more sense as an onset to be low and slow. That now, if you like going 2 days per week and that's your starting exercise, like, do that. I'm just saying that I think there's going to be a huge percentage of the population that are going to be like, oh, I can just go once. Yeah, just go once.
Dude, the amount of people that don't believe me when I say that is absurd. Like the amount of pre-existing relationships with this stuff that are so off base is really what we're fighting against. Because like,
yeah,
you're like, why is this like this? It's like because of market manipulation, man. No different than why people keep getting wrecked on stupid ass projects in crypto. It's market manipulation. It's propaganda. It's FUD. It's the stuff that's still allowed to exist, which free speech can do that, of course, and capitalism and all that good stuff. But the point is like there's good and bad out there, and if people can't discern because they don't have proper mentorship and education growing up, so they're just kind of like, I don't know any better. I'm just gonna pick what I think everybody should be because everybody talks about working out and Bowflex and the ab crunch and all this stuff.
Yeah.
The Peloton, is it really a new take on anything? No. Duh. Like, guys, come on. It's not that you can't be incredibly effective with the Peloton. We're not arguing that. You want to spend $2,000 on it? By all means, go for it. I have an expensive iPhone. I like the iPhone. Do I absolutely need it? Not really. Probably not. So the point is we're not really saying that's good or bad thing to be a purchaser of these, products. It's just understand the true effectiveness of what can be achieved with it and just make sure it makes sense. That's really all I'm saying. Yeah. So game theory mechanics, it's really a terminology I'm starting to use more when I talk to people about these subjects, because I need to make them think about the structuring of this differently. And what I've realized, especially with Richard talking about coins and really just being like, hey guys, what is the only thing you care about? Price performance. That's it. That's the game theory mechanics, right? You have the other stuff with hex, of course, but if you don't understand that weight loss or making body composition improvements and nutritional adherence is a game theory mechanic thing, because it has to do with, can we get ourselves to do it? We're not robots. We're not a code like hex that just runs. We're psychologically based creatures. We're emotional. If you don't have the game theory and the mechanics in order, the product will fail. And it fails across the board. That is why like obesity and these issues we see, especially in America, are going crazy. There's a lot of reasons for it. I'm not going to get into it, very layered and complex. But the point is if you're not taking into account game theory mechanics for adherence, sustainability, and what actually makes sense, whether it be your nutritional program or activity levels, in this case, resistance training, I'm telling you, man, it's just go back to the drawing board if you haven't thought of it like that, because it's a very, very different experience, and it's an exciting one because you regain control, right? Yeah. Most people don't have control when they don't do it that way because they don't have adherence. Without adherence, you flop around. And so didn't mean to rant too much there, but I think it could really, it's something I've honestly like realized the past week or two that I really want to start using the terminology more. I'm not like totally 100% sold on it, but if my 45 to 65-year-old females really like it and they could understand it and quickly adapt with it, shit. I mean, come on. Anybody should be able to understand that, because it kind of like shifts your mind out of weight loss and into, okay, I'm a human with emotions. I'm trying to resistance train. I need to think about this from a game theory standpoint and mechanics, not a number standpoint. Like how many times in the gym, how many reps, how many calories, how many this, you know what I mean? It's always numbers, I'm trying to shift people out of the robot headspace. So it's tough. You have to be careful with terminology, but it could be good when you find something that works.
Yeah. And you're totally right about people feeling like it's not in their control, and like feeling like they're not in the driver's seat. But if you're able to understand, I would say like even more so like the nutritional aspect that you referenced than the resistance training or the training, the exercise aspect, that is what will start to put you in the driver's seat. Like you will have a direct line into your inputs that affects your outputs. It just becomes, it's tough to really point to where the break in, where the downfall is there in that dissemination or that translation. But I guess just it is like a pretty comprehensive understanding. Like there are a boatload of fundamentals and principles going into that one idea.
Yeah, man, there is, dude. I mean, I've seen across the board when I see someone that's got a firm control of the game theory mechanics and nutrition, and they see all this progress coming, because once again, close to 80% of the equations coming from there. So a lot can happen with minimal effort if you know what you're doing. People organically shift towards wanting to be more active on their own terms. I'm not like a tyrant saying, hey, go do this strategy, go do this workout program. It just never works. It's the wrong order of operations, right? It's like a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but you're just going about it totally backwards. It doesn't work that way. So order of operations, game theory mechanics, when I see those things in order, people not only are able to be more active on their own accord, but they're able to have a more malleable headspace where they're able to more accurately identify, hey, what can I actually stick to? What makes sense? What do I actually freaking enjoy? So instead of them saying, I need to work out all the time, I'm doing this and that with nutrition, it's, okay, I actually like hiking with my family once a week. That plus going on a walk a few times a week makes best sense. And maybe I'll get into weight training if I lose a little bit more weight. Like a much more organic approach that's, like you said, starting slow, built up. It just creates the atmosphere for someone to actually think that way because of that order of operations, and that's just what I've seen. But man, I've just seen that pattern across the board, regardless of age range, regardless of gender, every single time, dude. It's very unique and rare where you just want to throw someone into the gym and they just pick it up. You have to get kind of lucky. It has to be someone that's ready to go, that already has like a mindset ready to take on those kinds of stimuluses. Because working out is difficult, and telling someone to go do it some days a week, man, like you may hit a winner, but like, dude, how many losses, if you will, do you hit with people? And by losses, I mean, how many people quit doing it, have a bad experience, and may never go back to the gym because of that.
Yep.
You got to think about it like that too. You can't just like, because I think a lot of trainers do that. A lot of trainers, nutritionists do that. They just throw a bunch of crap at people, nutritional program, meal plan, working out and stuff. It's like your success rate is low. And how many people do you turn away from ever caring about this ever again by doing so? No matter how many wins you have, I can assure you the win rate's not good, So yeah, it's a delicate subject.
Yeah. Let's pull these slides down. So the two most, I guess, applicable conclusions here that we found: every single group, every single condition was effective for increasing strength. So that very first one, the leg extension, perhaps, or like maybe one time per week, more so. One of the big talking points that I had was the time investment. The people who came in, they did one set once per week. They were in and out of the lab in, I don't know, like I warmed them up. There was like a warm up protocol for everybody. So they were on a bike for like 5 minutes. But they were in and out of the lab in like 20 minutes. One time, one set, once per week. The insignificance. So again, like I'm not, like I kind of am an academic, I guess, but I'm not a tenured professor. I don't have any like research or publishing obligations, and especially when I was a grad student. So like I didn't really care if shit was significant or not. Like I was kind of learning about this world where we were going through so much data and just like looking for significant things. We were just as soon as it was more than like P005, like go on to the next like metric. And you like my Excel sheet it's fucked. It's literally so fucked, man. And that was like it was kind of weird to me. I'm like, well, like I get that like a significant difference, like a statistically significant difference is very, very important. I just don't know that like it's just kind of become the pinnacle of academia. It's like, oh, we found a P of 0.01 over here in this obscure category that we actually can't draw any fucking conclusions from. Like, who the fuck cares? So to me, it was like, dude, I'm just as excited to see that it was insignificant.
Yeah.
That means that means it doesn't matter which of these conditions I choose. There's no significant difference between them. That's fucking awesome. You can go do this. You like that? No? Okay, how about this? No? Okay, how about this? No matter what you choose here, by the way, you're going to get very similar outcomes. So that was super exciting to me. I'm like, yo, the individual can just implement whatever best suits them. And I think 9 times out of 10, if you're new to exercise, that's probably going to be the less time intensive one, aka once per week, one set.
Yeah,
that was where we started. So I think everyone's just kind of like regurgitating what the recommendations are or what the prescriptions are, and like I get the reason behind that. There just needs to be more nuance, and I think that nuance also like needs to be in the exact same place. It needs to be listed alongside of those prescriptions and those.
The game theory mechanics are missing,
right? Like
to
not
complement it.
Yeah, not down here like with me, like some grad student who's like, "Yo, why aren't we talking about this?" Like ACSM needs to have a fucking footnote that says, "Yo, once per week saw exactly the same shit as our recommended 2 to 3 days per week. Just so you know.
Bro, business model. Think about it.
Yeah.
In general, I mean, think about business model for, in general, America being healthy overall, and how much of like our economy is sustained on people being unhealthy. Like there's a fine balance there. It's pretty fucked up, but it's a fine balance on how much relies on unhealthiness as well as wanting the people to be healthy. Because you made that's such a strong comment you made about like, why are we not paying more attention to these things? And I'm not saying it's all just like out of like, oh, like there's a conspiracy here or anything. I'm sure like in academia, people aren't doing it on purpose to support a bigger bad cause. Obviously not. But we've been so trained to not care about the actual problem that we're looking for things that don't fucking matter anymore. So game theory mechanics, which is the only thing that really matters, if nobody can do it because nobody can stick to it, then it's not going to work 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. That is literally the environment we operate in, whether it be food or working out, right? Nobody I know can tell me that they've been going to the gym 7 times or even 4 times in a row for the past 10 years. Nobody. So where do we go with this, right? What is the game theory mechanics here? You know what I mean? Like, how do we operate in a way that gives a success rate that is pretty good across the entire age spectrum, et cetera, based on the culture and environment, right? The macro environment we're operating in, especially after the past few years and how every country has changed quite dramatically. So the point is like, obviously we're talking about resistance training in this episode, but we're coming back down to the same points of like adherence, consistency, sustainability, starting slow, and building a positive relationship with this stuff, because the answers are not going to be sexy. They're not. Look to dietitians and doctors who are going to regurgitate the same stuff. That's not hating on them. But once again, that didn't work in the 90s. It really didn't work in the 2000s. And it's absolutely sure as shit not working in the 2020s with the obesity metrics going on right now.
Yeah.
And these are people that are still working out. And we still have problems. Guys, working out is not how these changes are really going to happen. It's great. It has a lot of benefits. No one's ever going to argue against that. But game theory mechanics on working out versus nutrition, which one makes more sense to start with, right? If I'm a betting man, I would go the 80% over the 20%.
Yeah.
Not saying you can't do both. That's the whole point of why we're having this episode here now.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't have to do as much as you would likely think on the resistance training side to create a great stimulus and a great response from some of the things exercise was talking about. So yeah, man, it's dude, oh my God, this subject is like, I wish like every guy in their 20s and 30s could hear this right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
But that's the thing. If people's worldview aren't ready to be updated on this, then they're just going to dismiss and keep doing what they're doing. But it's literally the definition of insanity, man. Because like I said, look at the people who don't look the part, who are okay with being unhealthy in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and just think that that's normal. I'm like, man, this is like the Twilight Zone. Literally, it's the Twilight Zone. Like, I don't know what needs to happen to make people really have to force themselves to update their worldview, but I think things have to get very serious before that happens, for sure. And it ain't going to be a conversation about how can I go to the gym 2 times a week or 4 times a week. It's like, guys, the average weight of somebody in America is 250 to 350 pounds. They're not going to a gym. At that weight, it's not really conducive to do some of those movements. At that point, it's kind of all food and relationship with food and structure and game theory mechanics. So it becomes even like less of like a importance, if you will, which is really crazy, you know, because your ability to even just go out and go on a walk is very difficult at that point, with like knee pain and inflammation and shingles and foot pain and like all the things that come into the mix that, you know, really hurt somebody from being active. So if you're in a spot that's conducive to being active, you're blessed. Go out and be active, but do it within some of the means that we're talking about. And I think you're going to build a much better relationship with it.
Mm-hmm. What do we got here? I'm doing 4. So this is 6 days per week. Stylus 19. I'm doing 4 to 6 days per week, depending. Okay. Since January 17th. That's great to hear. Eating tons of protein, low carb, no sugar or bread. It's a grind. Sled front and backward every day. Peloton 2 to 3 times per week. Wow. That's a lot. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Keep it up. If there's a couple weeks that that doesn't happen, just hop back on that horse. Rotate arms, chest, back every day. Basically, sometimes take a day for recovery. I'm sure I could massively improve, but I'm seeing gains so far. Slightly overweight, 5'8" guy. Yeah, if you are consistent with your resistance training, you will see gains. You will see improvements. And though it just depends kind of like what you're looking for. Like you'll see the weight you're able to lift go up almost certainly. A lot of people are looking for like results in the mirror. That might take longer, right? It almost will certainly take longer for most people. So yeah, I would say, yeah, keep going. And I think like my 2 or 3 tenets are do something. Yeah, I've just started typing some out, so I'll pull this up. My 2 or 3 tenets for resistance training: keep it simple. Like that's my number one reminder. Do resistance training that works for you, that you like, that you want to do, that you can do. So I don't care what it is really. Find a schedule once per week even is fine that works for you and you can adhere to for a long time. And then when you are going through that training, make it difficult. It should be fairly intense. Now, it doesn't have to be the hardest thing in your life, right? But it should be on a scale of 8 of 10. It should be around 7 out of 10 hard most of the time. If you're having a bad week, you feel like shit, you can either take a week off, or you can train a little lighter in the gym, right? Your relative intensity, how hard it feels in the gym, is a really, really good subjective proxy for this. If it's difficult for you in the gym, if you're struggling towards the end of the set, if your last rep feels harder than the first rep, that's a really, really good indication. That's as simple as it can start. Like we've kind of alluded to, there is, like, if you want to talk about specific outcomes and specific training programs, there are 1,000,001 rabbit holes that we can go down, and 1,000,001 things that apply here. So I think that is going to definitely be an episode for another time. Maybe programming or like setting goals, whether it be strength, power, aerobic, anaerobic, like just maybe daily living types of things. There you can optimize, but in general, the differences that we see are like very, very minimal. So really, when it comes to trying to get really, really specific and really, really particular about a program, it's most beneficial for like the less than 1%. Like I'm talking professional athletes. Like now, if I've got a professional athlete, I want to put them on a specific program to target a extremely specific outcome. Whereas if you're just trying to live better, like, yeah, go lift. You will live better. Or resistance training of any kind. Incorporate activity of any kind. If you do that consistently, you will live better. So yeah, those are I was just like typing out like what is the simplest prescription that I would give. Like if I was the ACSM, so this isn't how they would word it, of course, but putting footnotes like, hey, do something that you can do something that you will do, find some sort of schedule, and then from here, now we can talk about increasing. Right now we can talk about adding a set or adding a day or adding whatever. There's so much room to manipulate from here moving forward.
100%. Yep.
Let's try to finish out these comments, and then what do you think? What are you thinking? Maybe calling it?
I would think keeping this one as simple as possible is good.
Yeah,
this is too nitty-gritty.
Yeah, this is very just fundamental, kind of what is resistance training. Turns out it's pretty much everything, and no matter what you do, you will see some sort of improvement if you continue to do it, and then if you continue to increase the load or the stress over time. I do similar workouts for a couple of years. When I really push the weight limit, it's when I'm most satisfied. Yeah, this is a very common thing for a lot of people. It's really, really satisfying or encouraging or motivating to see the number on the bar or the amount of weight on the bar go up. It's also a really good indicator of the outcome. So just my, I guess, main point, or like main cautionary point, would just to be, don't prioritize it. Don't put it on a pedestal or overweigh its importance. If you are having a tough week, you can get very, very similar results and similar outcomes, similar responses with lighter weight and more reps. If you are now, like in the case of a power lifter who's gearing up for a meet, the conversation would be much more specific. But if you're just an average Joe and you're like, holy smokes, this week's tough or today's tough, but I really, really want to lift heavy weight, it's like, it's okay to have a day that's a little bit lighter. Again, I think like make it difficult for you is a really good, just subjective measurement. I've always stuck to 3 sets. I'm not trying to harp on 3 sets. I'm trying to complain about the prescription being 3 sets of 10 that is somehow stuck and become the way that resistance training is done. Like 3 sets is effective. It's great. It's just created this prescription that everyone thinks is the rule or the law that you should follow or you have to follow. Even is 3 sets of 10. There's so many options. Little motivation. I'm sure you've probably heard this before. I'll bet you David Goggins even says it. Discipline is greater than motivation, but motivation can definitely be helpful in moments or at times. I have no doubt strength training keeps me from injury. Rest, yes, 100%. 100%. Bone mineral density, I believe, should be the greatest talking point when it comes to resistance training. And bone mineral density being, I'm not sure if you were here earlier, functional crypto. Bone mineral density is extremely highly correlated with injury in the later years. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Stylist. Thanks for being here live, and thank you for the comments. Thank you. That is the end
Thank you, gents,
of our comment line. What else do we got going on? I don't think we got much going on, man. What do you got going on?
Not too much, bro. Just trying to ignore the drama on Twitter for now.
Ignore the noise. Ignore the noise. Zoom out. What was the one thing I wanted to do? Maybe talk about some NHL playoffs. We got NHL playoffs ramping up. For all of you that don't know what the NHL is, it's hockey. I am in Canada, so this is very, very big for us, and it's even larger now that we've moved into the second round, and there is a battle of 2 Canadian teams. So in the NHL, I think there's 30 teams, and there are 8 Canadian teams. I can't remember the last time a Canadian team actually won the league.
Snap! Is that the Lightning? Where aren't they from? Texas? The Lightning?
The Lightning are from Tampa Bay.
That's what I was telling you.
Dallas. This Dallas Stars would be your hometown team. They just lost to the Calgary Flames. So I am a Oilers fan, and we are going up against our province. So I'm currently not in Alberta, but that's kind of where I was born and raised. This is a battle of 2 teams within the same province, about 2 or 3 hours down the road from one another. This is going to be a crazy series. If you've never watched hockey before, I'm almost certain that you'll love it. It's a great sport to watch. It's extremely entertaining. There's fighting. There's goal scoring. It has everything. Extremely impressive sport to watch. So this is what I'm spending some of my time doing lately. Just watching some hockey. Yeah, two Canadian teams. The other Canadian team that made the playoffs, which was Toronto, is out. So Colorado, St. Louis, Florida, Tampa Bay, Carolina, New York. Nice. Get on the Oilers bandwagon. We have the best player in the league. His name is Connor McDavid. People probably heard about him, even if you haven't heard about hockey. All right, I'll leave it there. That's some feel-good stuff. Watch some hockey. Zoom out. Yeah, tune out the noise. Just tune out the noise.
That is some feel-good with everything going on these days.
Watch some hockey playoffs, man. It's good. And with that, I guess we'll send you on our way. We are here Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Central time, or whatever the heck time you're on that works with those times. We will see you next time.
We will see you guys. Tune in next time.
Bye.